Bret, your stories of feeling like a misfit hit a nerve. Did those feelings hinder or help in your personal evolution? Please tell us more. Love the show.
Oh yeah, they absolutely helped. They're just so liberating. And for those who maybe don't remember the conversation that this is alluding to, my feeling is misfit is a good term because it's non-judgmental if you think about it just literally, right? The fact that you are a misfit for some institution or organization doesn't say whether it's you who's off or it who's off, and it could be both. Um, but when I was dealing with students, and I took a special interest in students who were misfits for one reason or another, my point to them was you can embrace this category because it doesn't say anything about you, right? It says that in the context of this other thing that you maybe don't get along with, that there is a mismatch. But I think the problem is if you're not a misfit, and I think frankly, most interesting people are misfits at one level or another, right? They're just of an unusual type because, in some sense, if you find the world a very easy place, right? If it just all fits, then you tend to default into the modes that it has established, and you become of a familiar type to the extent that you are a mismatch for something. You're forced to invent some mode that works for who and what you are. And so I guess the point, I was enough of a misfit for the systems that I was forced to interact with that just doing what I was being asked wasn't going to work. And the discovery that it wasn't going to work didn't leave a lot of choice but to figure out something else to do. And so, yeah, the net effect was liberating. And, I wish more people, the important part is the liberty. It's not the misfit part, right? So I wish more people had that license to figure out their own way.
But you were unusual, at least by your own telling, and I didn't know you at this age. But in effectively from the moment that you were labeled by school as sort of not worthy of it, of being certain that it was school who had gotten it wrong, as opposed to you who were fundamentally unfit for the world. And certainly most people don't start out there. Many people don't end up there. Many people conclude that they are actually a wrong person.
Yep.
and not okay. And they believe the lies being told them about themselves. And that was also many students whom we saw and many other people whom we meet are still wrestling with how to get through a lifetime at that point, up until whatever age they are, of believing bad authorities who told them things about themselves that made it very difficult to become their best selves. And somehow you seem to have been resistant to that from a very young age. And figuring out how to be resistant to that, I think, would be extraordinarily useful for most people. And I don't have clarity on how that worked for you. And I feel that when we've talked about this before, not on camera, it sort of generally feels like, well, this is just like who you are, but that's not useful advice.
Yeah. So obviously I was very young at that point, and so I only, I have a kid's memories of what that stage was about. I do think some of it had to do, at that age, very young, I had two living grandparents, both of whom were very thoughtful, very smart, and took a tremendous interest in Eric and me. And one of them, my grandfather, lived until he was 94, and so anyway, he was sort of a consistent force. And he had his own struggles, and so there was always a force basically leading towards suspecting authorities that wanted to give you a diagnosis that there was something wrong with you, that maybe it was the force that was wrong and not you. But there was also, I think, something...
So examples, more powerful if they're personal to you, but examples of here's when authorities are wrong when they here's examples of authorities being wrong when they've tried to diagnose other people.
Right.
Yep.
And, you remember Harry, my grandfather, who was also a very fun, engaging, disarming kind of a person. And so it wasn't just somebody there to say, actually, authority is a problem in and of itself, but it was, a very appealing person who showed how it was done, right? He used charm and humor and all of these things to get through a world that otherwise would have been quite hostile to him, and in some cases was quite hostile to him. But all of that existed in a context where I think also Jewishness has something to do with this, because, especially at the time when I was a kid, I didn't realize how recent World War II was. I mean, I obviously could do the calculation, but it seemed a very long time ago.
It felt like it was so long ago, and by comparison to how long ago it is now,
Right.
it was so recent.
It was so recent. And so anyway, the point was my elders were both responding to what they had seen that I hadn't.
No one in your immediate family had been in Europe during World War II.
Nobody in
Right.
my immediate family
Right.
had been there.
Yep.
But there was a recognition of the fact that civilization could turn on you, right? And that was both about the Holocaust, but it was also about a much longer history of persecution.
Sure.
And so I think that there is something in Jewish culture, informal culture, that's about, yeah, you should learn to do the things that you're supposed to do, but you should also be aware that that thing can turn
Always
toxic
keep an
on you.
eye out.
Yeah, keep an eye out, because it can happen, right? And that was the refrain from the generations that I knew ahead of me was, be aware it can happen here, and you're going to want to be on the lookout for it. So at the point you encounter some version of it that has nothing to do with ethnicity or anything,
Right.
but really is about some system that doesn't know what it's talking about, trying to shift responsibility for its failures onto children. Right?
And I imagine, maybe this is a caricature, but I sort of imagine some of your teachers early on, you show up every day still the same. They're like, "Didn't we stamp you yesterday? Where'd the stamp go? I thought we did this thing to you, and you seem to have survived. What is going on there?" And frankly, there's an anti-fragility. Which is more than resilience and robustness. There's an anti-fragility. It's like, "Oh, you going to stamp me again? Okay, let's see how this goes."
Yeah.
Yeah.
And it really, I do recall, I'm sure it wasn't this clear, but I do recall a sort of choice between, do I either accept its judgment and then everything downstream of that just looks really unpleasant, or do I reject this? And then there are a bunch of unpleasant things that come with rejecting school's authority over you. But then there's also the possibility of making your own way. And it was just far and away the better deal. And so I would encourage you, if you know a kid who's faced with such a thing, to get them to think in these terms. School's judgment of you is far from everything. And in fact, it may, especially as school gets stupider, it may be the worst thing for you.